Right, I've literally just finished the Mauricio Pochettino high-performance interview with Jake Humphrey and Jesus Perez alongside him, and it is a very interesting listen for Tottenham Hotspur fans. I think he is coming back in the summer. That's just a gut feeling. That also seems to be the gut feeling of Jake Humphrey, who tweeted this just now when someone asked him after he was promoting the podcast itself. I sense he might. When a fan replied saying, "Great interview, Jake. Really hope he comes home in the summer." I sense he might. And I sense that he might as well because of some of the answers that he gave in this and just the fit for what Tottenham feel like they need right now. I'm still not 100% sure if it's the right thing to do from a footballing standpoint, but there is so much reason still to be optimistic about Pochettino coming home and it working out for good this time. Look, under this board, under these new people that are running the football club that I just still don't know if they have a clue really what they're doing, I'm not sure many people would succeed, but in terms of actually squeezing as much juice as you can out of what is a really talented young squad, I still think Pochettino is the guy. And speaking of squeezing juice, there was obviously a reference to the lemons. Jake Humphrey threw him a lemon. The lemon protects you from the energy of people that do not have good energy. And if you think I've got good energy, or you've got good energy yourself, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. It massively help me out on the road to 20k. I also uploaded a video earlier on with my thoughts on Christian Romero. Please make sure to go and watch that. I'll leave that as the end card in this video so you can just click off once you finish watching this video. And yeah, let's get into it, right? Because first of all, let's quickly run through the kind of different chapters of this, right? He talks about Harry Kane's breakthrough kind of at the start, which I'll come on and speak about near the end because I want to start with the end, and you'll see why in a second. He talks generally about developing young talent, which is something I want to focus on in this video as well, working with superstars and managing egos when he went to Paris Saint-Germain, dealing with the media pressure, especially at Paris Saint-Germain as well. Talks about the World Cup. Obviously, quite a lot. I don't think Pochettino is coming home before that. I will say that off the back of this interview, which is something that some Spurs fans think that he might do. I doubt that's going to happen. Talks about his future in these quick-fire questions that come at the end, and obviously the bloody lemons. I also want to talk about in this video, and if the Pochettino thing ramps up even more, then I will do a video about how he could set up at Tottenham, just for a bit of fun for us guys, really, to kind of dream with the people that want him back. But I also do want to talk about Chelsea a little bit in this and why it kind of didn't work and why certain people might have reservations. But we'll come on to that because a lot of you guys would have seen the quotes that have been going around from this. Obviously, the High Performance podcast have cut up clips, teaser clips from this to promote the pod. And obviously, they've led with the Spurs angle, the Tottenham stuff. And the quote that you guys would have seen is that it's not true that we didn't want to win titles like the Carabao Cup or the FA Cup. We were focusing on too many places, talking about the stadium, moving to Wembley, etc., unsettled situation. Tottenham is a club that needs to think to win the Premier League and the Champions League. The facilities are Champions League level. It's true that fans today totally appreciate that we were a challenger for the Champions League and the Premier League. The Europa League win is good. I'm paraphrasing to an extent now. The Europa League win is good, but not enough for Spurs. Neither is the FA Cup or Carabao Cup. And Jake Humphrey asked him at the end of the podcast, he said, to end it, he said, well, you love Tottenham. You want to win the Premier League. Tottenham have the facilities to win the Premier League. Let's see what the universal energy does. Referring back to the lemons, of course. And he said after that, return to the Premier League as World Cup winners. Now, Pochettino and Jesus Perez kind of interjected laughing at the end of that, saying we'll see what happens. But the way that he speaks about Spurs in this and the way that he's always spoken about Tottenham, obviously, is that it comes with so much affection and so much genuine connection and love to the club. The connection was really, really strong. We built all this history together is kind of what he's saying. When we arrived, I think the way that we have the possibility to create something special in Tottenham with the project ahead with the new stadium, you need the trust of the owner and Daniel to create this and the patience to support us in the beginning. It obviously wasn't easy. Talk about being sacked, etc. And he said not winning a trophy with Tottenham and it not being considered a success is completely unfair. And he kind of took a big pause as he went into this big thing about Spurs. And it just kind of made me think, and you'll only see this when you watch the interview, and I still implore you to do this as well as watch it, kind of listen to my thoughts on it and your thoughts on this. I appreciate that it might be too raw at this point for people to watch the full thing, so maybe you will just watch my breakdown of it, and just don't take my word for it, but this is just my opinion. The kind of pause that he takes when he goes to speak is just like, you can tell there's so much love there, and there is just unfinished business. And this all came off the back of quick fire questions where it was essentially like a Mr. and Mrs. style game. You can see there with the whiteboards out there where they had to answer what they thought the other person would say. So The first question was I think it was a player that you hold the most. I actually can't remember what the first question was. It's not really important. The second one was the player that surprised you most in your career. Pochettino started talking about a lot about Ryan Mason. Then one of the questions was, what is which kind of led us to this point? What is the trophy that you'd most like to win in your career? Both of them wrote the Champions League, but Pochettino wrote down the Champions League and the Premier League. Jake Humphrey asked him, do you believe that one day you'll win the Premier League? And he said, yes, yes, yes. He said, I don't know how I'm going to achieve it, but for sure, I don't know which club. And it feels like it's an obsession for him to come back and win the Premier League. And again, we can talk about the fact that, is any manager going to do that at Tottenham under the setup? Probably not, right? But we want to feel something as fans right now. And with the desperate situation that we're in, and it's not going to be until the summer if it does happen, it does feel like an easy box tick thing for this owners to try and build that fan connection, which they have done so much work to kind of destroy with the persistent backing of Thomas Frank, not sacking him at the right time, all those kind of things. We could have had an interim manager. When you look at Michael Carrick, who's kind of injected that energy into United and freedom, and that's something I want to talk about. Freedom is a big thing that I want to talk about in this video when he's talking about developing young players, etc. Like, the idea of Pochettino is everything that we want right now, I think, as a Spurs fan base. And that's not even me just talking about the connection that is already there. That's talking about what Pochettino symbolises and represents as a football manager, which kind of goes a lot against what Thomas Frank represents. And look, I've been a little bit kinder on Thomas Frank the last few weeks because I think the performance against Man United, the way that he kind of set us up prior to the Romero red card, was a team that maybe does feel like it's slowly moving in the right direction, but it's still a very, very grim situation. But in terms of Pochettino's attitude and the way that he kind of comes across in this, and the mentality and culture and everything like that he wants to create in every team that he goes into. And that kind of takes me on to Chelsea a little bit, really, because, and we'll come back to the interview in a sec. So when I think back to that Chelsea team that he kind of walked away from as much as he was sacked, it was a kind of mutual termination of the contract, right? Obviously, different ambitions in terms of the style of football with Egg Barley and Paul Winstanley and those kind of guys. Pochettino wanted to play kind of more direct football. Those guys wanted to play possession football, saw players like Enzo Fernandez as a key part of the puzzle and everything like that. And actually, Chelsea's kind of upturn in form towards the end of the season came when Enzo Fernandez wasn't really there. Cucurella kind of moved into an inverted midfield position. Chelsea played a lot more direct. Gallagher pushed further up the pitch. Caicedo next to Cucurella. Chelsea only lost one game, and that was getting battered by Arsenal at the Emirates, if you guys remember, after losing that Carabao Cup final to Liverpool, where it felt like with the players that Liverpool had out that day, the youngsters that they had on the pitch, the chances that Chelsea missed, there was no real way back from that. And now, obviously, chances that Chelsea missed was kind of a big theme because they were a team that created a lot of chances from direct attacks, but their conversion rate was incredibly poor, like really, really poor. And it felt like they were kind of moving in the right direction, but Nicholas Jackson would miss chances, other guys would miss chances, etc. But it definitely felt like it started to click. And I think you don't create an environment that has no belief as a manager. If you're a Chelsea team that are like mid-table at the point where they lost that Carabao Cup final, I think 12, it felt like he was threatened with the sack every single week, really. The Chelsea fans didn't have that connection to him, obviously because of the Spurs stuff, but also maybe it was the sort of beginning of the end of what Chelsea is now, in the sense that he wasn't a manager that just fitted in with what Chelsea was, I guess. Maybe not a winner, so to speak, that they've kind of been used to having. But you are a manager that, you're not a manager that's not able to create an environment that believes in themselves and believes they can win. If you can then go and turn around what he did in that second half of the season with Chelsea and towards that run towards the end of the season, where they won the last 5 games in a row, finished only 5 points off of 4th place, only finished 3 points behind us actually that season as well. And obviously there was the whole thing with the coefficient where 5 teams going to get the Champions League. They could have easily finished in the Champions League that season, turning around a really difficult situation. And he speaks a lot about kind of the environment that he created at Chelsea, and I'll come on to that in a bit when we talk about development of young players. But it's that belief, it's that injection of passion and I guess the winning mentality that you kind of put into these young players to turn around a difficult situation that they found themselves in. And again, that's what Spurs need right now. And I think there was issues with the style of play at Chelsea. They were a team that were so caught in the middle of wanting to be a direct attacking team, but also a possession-based team. And that kind of clash of mindset from the people that run the football club and also Pochettino himself, that they had they had like the most amount of possession in their defensive third, or in their penalty area and the defensive third out of any team in the league, but really kind of struggled to build through the thirds, right? But when Pochettino wanted to play more direct, that is where they saw a lot of their chances come from, right? And their pressing numbers, you could see that there was the desire and the structure there to kind of press, which is exactly what Pochettino is all about. But they would very rarely get turnover situations. It didn't feel like the team was kind of necessarily pressing together at points. And it was just this, I guess, culture clash a little bit with the people at the top and the sort of players that they wanted to buy for Pochettino. And that's why someone like Conor Gallagher was obviously so successful, because he was a Pochettino player to an absolute T, but he was viewed as one of Chelsea's most sellable assets because he didn't really fit in with the style of play that the owners wanted to play, and that's why they wanted to ship him out of the football club. And that's exactly what happened. And now, obviously, he's ended up back at Spurs and could potentially be a key piece if Pochettino was to come back. So there was this idea that Pochettino's football didn't necessarily work, but I think it was much bigger than that. And we did see times where it clicked. And I think people have been put off with Pochettino coming back to Tottenham because of what happened at Chelsea. But I think it was more to do with that kind of clash of desire from the people above to Pochettino and the type of players that were recruited for Pochettino more than anything. That's not to. I'm not taking any blame or responsibility away from Poch whatsoever. There was things that they didn't do well, I suppose, but it did start to click towards the end. They did miss a lot of chances as well, and a lot of their chances came from individual moments of brilliance, but that is also what Pochettino is able to do in terms of injecting that confidence into young, hungry players like Cole Palmer. Now, let's talk about that, right? So, he was asked about developing young players. And you look at Tottenham's squad now, right? Let's get Tottenham's squad up. And you look at the young talent that is kind of there, right? If we go into that, let's go on to FOTMob quickly. If we look at Tottenham's squad, right? And we look at the age of these guys. Now, Byfield 17, Sousa 19, Gray 19, Bergvall 19, Tell 20, Odegaard 21, Xavi Simons 22. And Xavi Simons is a player that I think is right in my mind when we're talking about what we're about to talk about. Kinski 22, Udogie 23, Sarr 23. Even some of these guys like Kulusevski, Van der Ven 24, 25, Gallagher 26. Like a young, hungry squad right here. And he was asked about what does it take to kind of develop these young players, which he's obviously had such a great track record of kind of doing. He said you need to have the emotional skills to know when to protect young players and when to push them. Look at the young players that we've got now at Tottenham. That's what they kind of need. You look at someone like Matthijs Tel, for example, who feels like he's not necessarily been developed in the right way or not being given the platform to kind of succeed, being kind of shut out at times. Other young players not necessarily being given opportunities at points as well. He said, and Jesus Perez kind of echoed this as well, saying you've got data analysis and everything to support you, but it's about the human side and the soft skills that matter so much in terms of managing young players and developing them. Poch had an amazing connection with Levi Colwill that they speak about in here as well, who didn't actually want to come back to Chelsea because obviously there was not necessarily bridges burned before, but he didn't feel like it was necessarily the right place for him, but Pochettino was able to convince him. He obviously made mistakes along the way, Colwill, but look at the kind of player that Poch was able to kind of develop into. And I think if he didn't have the injuries that he's had over the course of the last year or so, you'd see him kick even more on under the likes of Maresca and Rosinia. But I think it was Poch that really was able to kind of kickstart that. And then Jake Humphrey brought up a few quotes from Cole Palmer. Cole Palmer said, they gave me the opportunity and the freedom to do what I do. And that is really what we lack right now. And that is what Tottenham have always been about. It's about what Pochettino's kind of football in theory, right? And there might be better managers out there that could kind of implement this in practice potentially. And it might be worth exploring them rather than kind of going back, because people say never go back and all those kind of things. And I totally understand the sentiment fans that feel like that. It's never going to be as good the second time. And again, do you actually trust them to be able to give everything that Pochettino wants and would need to come back? He spoke quite a lot as well about like his relationship and connection with Levy, which I think was still strong even after he sacked him, and he's not even there anymore. And we always kind of used to say, or maybe Poch will come back after Levy's gone, but actually, if Levy was still there, I feel like Poch would probably want to come back more than maybe what he's looking at with Spurs right now. It feels like but then again, it also does feel like a little bit of I'm going to put myself out there as this sort of PR thing to say, I'm here, lads, come and get me. Because it does feel a bit like that. So I'm kind of conflicted and torn a little bit on the motivations behind this, but also whether he'd want to come back. I still think he probably would because of that. You can tell how much he loves the Premier League and the amount of young talent that is in the Premier League. And I think he speaks so highly of the connection with the fans. And I think the club will maybe look at that and try and do everything they can to get him, because it would be a PR kind of win for them, I suppose. But anyway, let's talk about Cole Palmer. That freedom in some of the players is really what we lack right now. I think there's a lot of, and I think it's what the Premier League kind of lacks a little bit anyway. And I think that's when you look at like Michael Carrick, for example, he's not reinvented the wheel really with what he's done in Man United, and maybe that's patronising or kind of not giving him enough credit. But the credit that you can give him is that he's played players in their best positions, given them the freedom and license to kind of move around, those players in the attacking third that know exactly what they're doing. And Palmer is that sort of player that has a feel for the game. I think Xavi Simons, again, is another player that kind of has that feel for the game. He knows where to be. Look at him even on Saturday in that kind of first half an hour, picking up loads of different positions, having the freedom to kind of do that or taking it upon himself to do that. We have lacked that a lot this season. It's kind of too structured, too rigid. We're going to kind of create chances this way. We're not going to play through the middle of the pitch. We're going to go long, try and get in behind, and it's just like not getting the best out of our best players and almost bypassing someone like Xavi Simons for a long time. Whereas Palmer, everything kind of went through him. And I feel like Xavi Simons or Maddison when he comes back, Kulusevski as well, under Pochettino, three players that work really hard, do the hard yards, but also can offer real amounts of creativity and quality in the final third if they are afforded the freedom to do that. And we've seen Maddison and Kulusevski under a manager in Ange Postecoglou who's given them that kind of license, be able to do what they can, to deliver on what we know they can do, and they've done that. So again, I think it's just these kind of little things that just does everything that he says makes it. That's what you want. That's what we want. That's what Tottenham is about, right? He said players need to respect the organisation, but they can bring chaos and freedom. The organisation is more about out of possession stuff and winning the ball. But Poch said he's never going to cut the potential and capacity of someone like Palmer, who has the quality to do what he can do in the final third. And I'm sure that Thomas Frank does feel the same in a way, but we just haven't seen enough evidence really of that this season, up until maybe more recently, really. But it really held us back in the first half of the season to a point where we've maybe reached this point of no return, where we've got a massive injury crisis, a really thin squad, and although the football might be slightly better than it was pre-Christmas, and we might be slightly moving in the right direction, even though the table wouldn't suggest that, because the team around us keep winning and we're not able to pick up results, it's almost a little bit too little too late, because if we'd have seen a little bit more of this in the first half of the season, then probably we wouldn't be in this position, really. And also that's also to do with Xavi Simons kind of landing, taking his time to land, all those kind of things. But anyway, Poch talks so much about the best way to kind of prep them being about understanding their emotions and the kind of culture. There's that famous quote that I think came out of Chelsea's dressing room when Poch and Jesus Perez were there: culture eats strategy for breakfast. Jesus Perez was saying no matter what your age or experience, we'll treat you fairly, and if you're not playing, we'll be more intense to coach and develop you. And that feels like it's maybe something that's not really been happened with Spurs' younger players, and Matty's Tell, for an example of that. Cole Palmer was talking about the fact that the manager speaks to me like a normal person. It relaxes me and gives the confidence to perform. And I think Pochettino's kind of soft skills, as much as there might be still tactical issues potentially, even though I think those tactical issues were quite a bit to do with the, like I said, the clash of kind of desires and cultures and styles at Chelsea. I still think he can get out a lot out of the group that we've got now, who are again like brave players who have been through a lot. I've got a lot of battle scars right in this Tottenham team. When you look at the likes of Gray, what he's kind of had to do, and other guys as well, like Odebear, he's a player that we feel like maybe doesn't perform because of his confidence, but you know the talent that is there. Matty's Tell, kind of the opposite. But imagine if he just had that extra kind of 10% or 20% injected into him by Pochettino. Bergvall, I think, is the sort of player that Pochettino would absolutely adore getting his hands on. We know he's got a great relationship with Conor Gallagher. Archie Gray, I think, is another one as well. And like I said, I'm not fully sold on it from a managerial perspective. Maybe there's other managers out there that might be able to do what Pochettino tried to do better, potentially. It's maybe worth taking a gamble on them, but it does feel like what Spurs need right now is someone that knows the club, loves the club, understands the connection between the fans and the club, which has been really, really broken. And although we don't necessarily trust that board, and I would almost view it as a bit of a PR hire to kind of try and get an easy win with the fans, I still do think it does make sense to go back to someone like Pochettino, and I'd be willing to take the gamble at this point, to be honest with you. He talks about the end, like kind of what I was talking about with the Chelsea thing at the start about the Carabao Cup, and talking about the end of it. The reason why we got to where we got to at the end of the season was because of the environment that he kind of created. It doesn't really feel like there's that environment togetherness here at Spurs right now. Is Thomas Frank the guy that can kind of really galvanise that? Is that risk-free environment, does that inspire the players enough to allow them to go out and feel the freedom to perform? I feel like that's a factor in why we've not been as good. And speaking about ambition, he was talking about the USA, and obviously a lot of this is kind of going to be PR, and he's going to say these things. He was talking about the fact that when he was at the FIFA World Cup draw, he met Donald Trump, and he was asked by Donald Trump, do you think you're going to win the World Cup? And he was like, of course we can. But he's been there a year and a half. Things have started to improve a little bit. It talks about challenging the pressure of the nation and kind of into energy. It talks about very high standards and ambition. He wants to win that World Cup. That is the line that's coming out from him. They're not going to win the World Cup, but you compare that kind of attitude and that puff your chest out, we're here, we're going to do this in our home country to make these guys proud, to, you know, what we're kind of hearing from Thomas Frank in terms of the start of the season, we will be losing games and all that kind of stuff. the kind of it feels like the standards. I remember Poch towards the end of the back end or points. Sorry, during his time at Chelsea, where he'd call out players and these kind of things, and although obviously you can question when managers do that sometimes. I think he understands the standards. I don't really think Thomas Frank is understanding of the standards at the moment. I feel like a lot of it is kind of self-preservation to kind of keep him in a job, a lot of the stuff that he's saying. And we know that Pochettino kind of isn't afraid to speak his mind when things aren't quite going his way. And I feel like we need a little bit of that right now for people to actually challenge the people above them, to make them realise that you need to do the work, to put the money in, the investment in, the care, and in terms of the recruitment to make me be able to help me do my job. Because Pochettino massively overachieved with the squad that he had. He obviously had some great players that he helped nurture and develop, but he wasn't really backed enough. Thomas Frank has had kind of more backing than a lot of the other managers and not really been able to deliver. But because he's been given that backing, he's obviously very grateful towards the owners, which is why he's kind of keeping them in the job. He talks about the connection, the relationships that they've kind of got. It's just really frustrating. But that ambition that is there with Pochettino to come back and win the Premier League, talking about wanting to win the World Cup, that burning desire that he has got with the Premier League and the Champions League, I think you want to feel that confidence from your manager, right? You really want to do that. And I just don't think Thomas Frank has been that inspiring, really. But he was talking about Harry Kane as well. I just think it's an interesting thing a bit to end on. He was talking about the club wanting to bring in Danny Welbeck during that summer. Obviously, Welbeck ended up going to Arsenal because Giroud got injured. Pochettino said, we don't want another number 9. We want to develop Harry Kane. He talks a lot about Harry Kane's mentality. Again, he wants to put that trust in young players. Again, we've got some really good talents here that need just that confidence and that environment created to kind of give them that confidence and inject it into them from a manager that is, an expert really at doing that. He wanted Kane to stay from day one. He had Soldado and Adebayor, but put trust in Kane from day one. The club wanted basically put out a statement saying he was happy with the strikers despite wanting a new one. The club wanted a new one. But he didn't do it because he didn't want to give Kane the impression that had only happened because they didn't get Welbeck and he went to Arsenal. He had Harry Kane knocking on his door from very early, demanding why he wasn't playing. He said to Kane, you're not playing well enough and your attitude isn't right. And the way that he responded to that was absolutely incredible. He knows how to get the best out of these younger players, and as does Jesus Perez. And although there might be issues, there was issues in and out of possession at Chelsea. It wasn't perfect. But I do feel like people do just ignore a little bit when things start to go well. Can Pochettino's football work in the Premier League now over a longer period? I'm not sure, but football does go in cycles, right? It does go in cycles. And you look at the success that Man United are having at the moment from just breathing that confidence and energy into these players. And I feel like Poch is good at that, giving them the kind of freedom that they kind of need, while also maintaining a solid out-of-possession structure. And he needs to have... I think, obviously, at Chelsea, it was... The main reason, I guess, they all fell out and it didn't work was because the clash between him and the people that run the football club is the same as Maresca, them kind of getting too involved with the style of football and that kind of clash in that way, and that's why Pochettino ended up walking away. I don't feel, as much as I don't necessarily trust these guys at Spurs, I don't necessarily feel like that would be the case, that they would interfere that much on the football side. So maybe it could work. I don't know. But that's kind of my breakdown of it. Go and watch it for yourselves. I just have this feeling that he's probably going to come back, and I feel like I know how I feel. I'm torn, but I'd be willing to roll the dice. Would you? Let me know in the comments. Would you want Mauricio Pochettino back at Tottenham? And if this does start to heat up, and if it does become a thing, then of course, obviously, we'll do some videos on it. But yeah, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to like the video for me. Get involved in the comments. We're nearly at 20,000 subscribers. If you could get me that push to get over the line, I'd be massively grateful. Big things coming. Lots of consistent content coming, and I appreciate you guys all so much. I'll see you very soon.